Welcome back to The Heat. The United States accounts for 5% of the world's population, but accounts for 25% of the world's prison inmates. That startling number is something U.S. President Barack Obama is working to change. The U.S. President is calling for reforms of the criminal justice system, starting with reducing long mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenders. Joining us once again is Joe Madison. He's dedicated much of his life to the civil rights movement and social injustices. Also with us from New York is Juanita Diaz-Cotto. She's studied the impact of the criminal justice system on women. From Columbus, Ohio, we're joined by Bob Ney. He's a former member of the U.S. Congress and speaks about prison reform. And from Philadelphia, we're joined by Gloria Browne-Marshall. She's a former civil rights attorney and author. Gloria, let's talk about privatized prisons here in the United States. I mean, one has to ask the question, is the U.S. running a criminal justice system or is it running a business?
It's running a little bit of both. I mean, you have to think about the fact that a lot of the services that are necessary for these prisons in the prison industrial complex, we haven't really talked about these towns that grew up around the prisons, and they feed off the prisons. Their primary sources of income would be the prisons. And so those towns then have employees, and the employees work for the private companies as well as working for the city or state or wherever the local jurisdiction is. And those private companies have actual trading on Wall Street, so that one of the ways in which they make money, they pay off their shareholders, is to stay in business. So now here is how the public school to prison pipeline works. They take tests in the 3rd grade to find out how a student is doing. If the student is failing those 3rd and 4th grade tests, it's predicted that by the time they get to high school, they will lose interest in the subject. They will then fall out of school, not graduate, end up in the adult prison system, and that's how they determine how many beds are necessary for the prisons that are out there in these rural communities that lost their economic basis to the Southwest or to overseas, and now a prisoner is the source of their income in those towns.
That is grotesque, Joe, that there is a business plan here to feed those prisons at all times, because the only way they can stay and make money is if they have more prisoners coming through.
It's absurd when you think about it. Look, people are in business to make money. How does a for-profit prison make money? They have to have more prisoners. And let me add one other thing, because everything that the attorney said is absolutely correct. And I think the former congressman would agree to this. There are municipalities, counties, that will include the prison population in their census count in order to get additional federal funding. And of course, these prisoners can't vote. Right. And people don't realize that. And so they play the game not only privately, but they also play the game for public funding.
And there's another group of prisoners that people usually don't think about unless you're Latino and an immigrant, and you are the people in immigration detention facilities. Right. 95% of the people in immigration detention facilities come from Mexico and 3 other Latin American countries. And the private prisons are also making money off those facilities.
Absolutely
Most
right.
of those people have not committed any crime. They're just here because they want to work and they're incarcerated.
Right, go ahead, Bob, you want to say something?
On the issue of private prisons, because Joe's correct about the census, but I have to mention, private prisons should absolutely not be allowed anywhere in America. They are an abomination. If privatization is so good, let the United States Congress privatize their offices and let a business run their office. That won't happen. Private prisons are for profit, period, and it is one of the worst things that has ever occurred in this country. It will not work, it's unenforceable, and it has no one to watch over it. I mean, no one. So it's the bottom line is going to be profit, and if private prisons continue, this entire system is going to go completely upside down.
Marco Rubio, for example, who's running for President of the United States, has benefited in terms of funding. He gets, I think, more than any other senator. He gets money from private prisons, and he hasn't spoken out about this. No one has asked him about this. They spend tremendous amounts, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying. So here you are lobbying to build more prisons instead of lobbying to reduce crime.
Because you're getting more money out of it.
Because you're getting more money.
Go ahead.
May I add one other point I think is very important, and that's recidivism. So we don't have the type of programs once someone leaves prison in order to educate them. There are many companies now that ask on the employment form in one form or another whether or not a person has a prison record or an arrest record. There are colleges now that will no longer take people if they have a certain type of arrest record. There are financial forms that ask people if they've ever been convicted of a crime or ask them if they've been convicted of a drug crime. So all of these things are playing into recidivism, the person returning back to prison, and then once again, you're keeping the system going of those people making money off of the people who are incarcerated. And the last point is this, the fact that we don't have them able to vote, which means who's representing their interests. They're counted within the census tract of those small jurisdictions, but the politicians are not representing their interests in any state, local, or federal government.
Right, talking about what children are entitled to, I know for a fact that children who've only been charged with a crime have not been allowed to go to certain colleges, have certainly not been allowed to go to certain private schools. Joe, when we look at legislation, as Bob pointed out, bipartisan support for change right now. President Obama calling for change. Are we going to see anything meaningful? Oh,
I think you will see it meaningful, and I'll just say it quickly. Once again, it's not because of some benevolent concern about too many black people or Hispanic people are in prison. Money's moving this. This is about the fact that states simply can't afford it anymore. And I think that's why you're going to see bipartisan support. And it's already taken place. You have a liberal Democrat in New Jersey and a conservative Republican from Kentucky. I think it'll happen.
Okay, Bob, what do you think?
Oh, yes, I think the window of opportunity is better now than it's been in decades. Again, I think a lot of the stars are aligning on this. And on the area of going out and then back into the prison, if I had not been in Congress, if I didn't have, people I know, I would have had a tough time to even get a place to live. I'm one of the lucky ones, frankly. There's a lot of people, there are no programs of any sort really to help them. You'll be told there are programs, there aren't. That all needs to be looked on the outside, not only the changes on the inside, but a window of opportunity is here. Let me make that very, very clear. And if the president can push this, which he will, I think we can do something.
Yeah, and Juanita, just one final point. Go ahead, you want to say something?
I have another take on that, on why they're losing money. Prisoners are the ones who maintain the facility through either very little pay, 25 cents an hour, $1 an hour, no pay at all, and they do all the maintenance works in the prison, and sometimes they build the prisons themselves. The rising cost of maintaining prisoners are not the prisoners themselves, it's the guard unions who are getting 80% of the budget of New York State, who make a substantial amount of money in California prisons. It's also administrative costs, the people that you hire to run the prisons. Okay. It's not the prisoners.
We are going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation continues online. Join us on CCTV America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter at CCTV_America. I'm Anand, Naidoo in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.